we can officially get started. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Kara Skolnick. I am an admissions officer at Rhode Island School of Design. And what that means is it's my job to support you all as you learn more about RISD and the application process, which is what we're going to dive into today. And I'm really lucky. We're all really lucky to be joined here by my colleague, Emily. And Emily, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kara. I'm Emily. I'm also an admissions officer at RISD, and today in this webinar, my role is to be a little bit more behind the scenes, answering questions that you all have, and then facilitating more of our conversational Q&A after Kara's amazing presentation. So the one thing that I ask of you all, a little bit of housekeeping, is please bring your questions to this webinar and type them into the Q&A box. This is important because we typically are only able to answer the questions that we see in the Q&A box, not the chat. I'll be posting links in the chat and then we'll be answering questions from the Q&A. If you can't find the Q&A, usually if you're on your phone, it's a bit hidden. Press the three dots on the right-hand side and then you should be able to find that option there. But that's just my little spiel for today. I'm going to pass it back to Kara and I guess we'll jump right in.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Um, okay, so I am going to start actually by turning my camera off so my Wi-Fi can keep up. And then I'm going to share my screen with you all. And Emily, if you could just let me know if it looks okay to you.
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. All right. So, hello again, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for all of your interest in RISD and your enthusiasm to learn more about the application process, which was so clear in how eager you were to share where you're from, which we love to see. Um, and I want to start out by acknowledging that the application process to any school can be overwhelming. And hopefully today we're going to take away some of the overwhelm and anxiety that comes with it. As you all know, we are here to talk about your final touches and give you a little bit of a checklist for your early decision applications. Um, and based on the excitement that we've seen so far, we also know that you've come prepared with questions, most likely. Please feel free to put all of those questions, as Emily said, into the chat, and we're going to answer most of them at the end. This is actually our fourth application prep, which is a part of our larger application prep series. And I want to let you know that you can also access all of those recordings on our RISD YouTube channel. So we will be also putting this on our YouTube channel. If there's any point in today where you got to tune out, and you really still want to know this information, just always know you can go back to YouTube to get all of it. Um, so, speaking of that, here's a list of what we've done so far in the application prep series. And keep in mind that there are application preps for transfer students as well. Anyone is welcome to also view those. And no matter what during your educational journey, you are always welcome to attend any and all of our webinars just to learn more and understand what the process looks like, or could look like for your future. Um, so today, what we're going to cover, we are going to talk about, of course, early decision applications. So we're going to talk about what early decision is. We're going to talk about application and portfolio requirements. Um, we're going to cover a little bit about how RISD collects application materials, and then what happens next after you put your materials through. At the very end, again, we're going to end with just some quick tips and an open Q&A. So at RISD, first year students, of course, can apply early decision. And early decision is an admissions option that is meant for students who know their top choice college or university. And hopefully, whatever school you choose to apply to early decision, that's going to be your top choice. So, early decision is a binding agreement. And what that means is if you apply early decision, you can only apply to one school early decision. And if you're admitted, that means that you commit to attending that school. So, if you apply to school ED and get admitted, you actually must withdraw all other applications from college or universities. And I also want to make clear at RISD, we offer early decision, but we do not offer early action. They are different, and you might see early action at some other schools. So keep that in mind. We'll start off by sharing some of our deadlines. So here are the application deadlines for first year applicants. As you see, the early decision deadline is November 3rd, regular decision is January 20th, and transfer is March 17th. Um, and of course, you're likely here because you're planning to apply for early decision. But keep in mind these other options. And if you're not comfortable with the binding agreement of early decision, or if you need more time to work on your application, regular decision is also a great time to apply. We do take deadlines seriously at RISD, but just know that we are here to work with you and help you meet these deadlines in any way that we can. Again, that's part of our job is to help you. And then next are financial aid deadlines. These are the most important deadlines that you will see and have to meet in your application process. So, of all deadlines, please highlight these ones. Um, as a reminder, all students applying for financial aid are required to fill out both the RISD Institutional Financial Aid Form and the FAFSA. So there's two forms you need to fill out, and they are both required. At this time, we anticipate that the financial aid packages will be released at the same time as the admissions decision. But please note that if this changes, you will be notified via email. And the financial aid packages will only be applicable for those who have submitted all of the required financial aid materials, which again are the FAFSA and the RISD institutional financial aid form. Probably the most important information that I will share with you today is again how important it is to fill out that RISD institutional financial aid form and fill it out as soon as possible. You do want to do this as soon as possible because it will help RISD build the best financial aid package for you and help you get the most information that is helpful to you as quickly as possible. So, if you want to learn more about how to prepare these things, we do have another webinar coming up on October 21st, where you can meet with a financial aid representative as well as our office again and just learn some more of the nitty-gritty details on how to prepare these things. Okay, so there are three different outcomes that are possible when you apply to RISD early decision. So if you apply ED, you can be admitted and you will commit to enroll in, which is the best outcome and we really hope for. The other outcome could be a deny, which would mean that you unfortunately cannot apply for regular decision. The other possible outcome is you could be deferred. So this means that your application will be reconsidered with the regular decision applicants. And then you'll either be admitted or denied at that time. So why apply for early decision? Here are some reasons why you might want to apply early decision. I think that most importantly, you want to again remember that if you are applying early decision, it should be to the school that you 110% know that you want to go to. It is your number one school in every way. Um, and if you get admitted, there's no reason that you wouldn't say yes. Um, it's also true that it can be a huge stress relief to apply early decision because you just know earlier what your future will look like. And then you can enjoy the rest of your year and not have that stress of still having to apply to schools. So those are the main factors. You'll know sooner, and it's really meant for those students who have their heart set on that one perfect school. Now, of course, regular decision is also an option. So the benefits of applying regular decision is that it gives you the agency to compare financial aid packages down the line. You have more time to work on your portfolio. And if you want to make sure that your grades are as strong as they can be, and maybe you want to get a grade higher in a certain class, then you would still have that time to do so. I want to emphasize that there is no wrong decision here, and you want to apply whenever it feels most appropriate for you. Every student is different. Um, and if you do feel like all your materials are where they should be, your portfolio is really strong, your grades are strong, then early decision really could be a great option for you. But don't feel stressed or pressured to apply early decision. Again, whatever is best for you is the right option. Um, and then just quickly, I want to note that there might be some students here who are interested in applying for the Brown RISD dual degree program. So I want to quickly just talk about what it would look like if you're interested in applying ED and dual degree. So if you're applying for the BRDD program, both schools do offer early decision. However, the early decision guidelines still remain true, which is that you can only choose one school to apply to early decision. So you would want to choose either Brown or RISD to apply to early decision, and then whatever school you didn't apply to early decision, you would apply to that other school regular decision. Now, if you are admitted or deferred to RISD, um, in say you apply to RISD ED, you would then apply to Brown regular decision, for instance. And if you're not admitted, unfortunately, then that will end your candidacy for the dual degree program. And we're not going to talk extensively about the BRD program in this webinar, but there have been a lot of webinars given in the past, which are posted on our YouTube page. And we also have another webinar coming up on October 22nd, which you can register on our website. And Emily will be there as well. So it will be a really informative event, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you are interested. Um, all right, so now we're going to dive into the first year requirements, which I want to mention these are all on our website as well. So, always check back on our website if you do have any questions outside of meeting with us. But once again, all of this will be due on November 3rd if you want to apply ED. So you will, of course, submit your common application, which will be the same place where you're going to submit an essay. We are going to look at your transcripts. We want to see 1 to 3 letters of recommendation. If English is your second language, we do require second language test scores. SATs and ACTs are both optional for students who apply. I don't see that changing anytime soon. And then, of course, your portfolio, which is probably the most important part of your application. I do also want to note that if you are looking for a fee waiver for the common application, please feel free to email us and we can make that happen for you as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Common App essay. I'm sure you all know by now that the Common App has an essay requirement, and if you are interested in digging even deeper into the application essay, we also have a webinar for that. So that was our application prep 3. So again, check back onto our YouTube to dig deeper into the essay. But I want to give you a visual of what it will look like once you get onto Common App, because sometimes it can feel a little bit easier when you already have that visual. So this is what you will see. And as you can see here, there's multiple choices for different prompts. For an essay, you only need to choose one of those prompts. So keep that in mind. And when you're writing your essay or pasting it into the Common App, we just encourage you to be mindful of formatting and to arrange your essay in a way that is really as easy to read as possible. I do like to talk about strategy when students apply, and that is a really good strategy that seems obvious, but you would be surprised to see how many students actually don't divide their essay up in really readable chunks. So one clear way to do that is to, again, divide your essay into shorter paragraphs instead of having one long, consistent block of text. And There is a feature in the Common App that allows your essay to be bold. Just make sure that it's not in bold text because that can be really hard to read. And we see a lot of essays in bold text. Um, so I always recommend writing your essay in another platform, maybe Microsoft Word or Apple Pages or a Google Doc, and then copy and pasting it into the Common App. And this also lets you do spell check and other helpful things that the Common App doesn't have. And this is just an example of what we mean when we say divide your paragraphs up instead of having them in one large chunk. Now, once you start your Common App, and once it's been submitted, you'll receive an email that will give you access to your RISD portal. And your RISD portal is going to be kind of like the website that you go to for all of your answers to see updates on your application, what you need to submit down the line. Um, So this space will also show you a checklist of everything that you have and need to do. Um, it's important to know that you want to give about 24 hours to see updates in your portal. So nothing is immediate with the RISD portal. Um, if after about 3 days you don't get an email to set up the portal after you've submitted your common application, um, and you've already checked your spam and promotional folder, please give us a call, send us an email, and we'll make sure that you have everything you need and are set up appropriately. Um, Again, the portal will be used for checking application materials and ultimately where your decisions will also be posted. Um, and again, it gets updated every 24 hours. So even with the portfolio, if you've submitted a portfolio through SlideRoom and it isn't showing as received immediately afterwards, do not panic. This is normal. And we run updates between SlideRoom and our database 4 times a day. So that can be an example for you about how often things get refreshed. And then missing materials, emails, and texts are automated and they are up to date when they are sent, but we can't really account for that delay. So please keep that in mind. And then at this point, once your Common App is pretty much done, there's a few things that you can control, and one of those things would be your letters of recommendation. We know that oftentimes, especially when you're applying early decision, it can take teachers a little bit of time to submit those letters of recommendation. So just know that we are very flexible with those. So our system does allow you to submit materials slightly after the deadline. And that's another thing that you just don't have to stress too much about. Okay, so the Common App has been started, and now you want to start your portfolio piece of your application. And your portfolio will be submitted on an online platform called SlideRoom. And again, we're not going to talk too much in depth about the portfolio in this info session, but we have a handful of portfolio tips webinars, which are listed on our website and can absolutely be tuned into before the deadline. We also have a few more coming up. And we have portfolio review events too that you can sign up for. The one thing I want to emphasize about your portfolio in summary would be to remember that all first year students begin their RISD education in the Experimental and Foundation Studies program. So you won't be applying directly to a major, and this means that your work should not be restricted to one interest or one medium. And it's a really good idea to consider all of the general values that you'll work on in EFS, like experimentation, process, conceptual thought, creative problem solving, and of course, technical skills. You must include at least 12 pieces, but you have up to 20 slots for your portfolio. And as you know already, RISD values experimentation with different mediums and disciplines and working even with non-traditional art mediums at times and going beyond the obvious solutions and methods. And it's a good idea to include more than one kind of art form in your portfolio. Maybe even try mixed media, again, with EFS in mind. In general, RISD also looks for art that has a point of view. So please show us what inspires you. And we also love to see developed concepts, evocative ideas, and not just technical exercises. So consider how you can use your technical skill like composition, mark making, lighting, space, texture, color, all to convey an idea, or an environment or story or a mood. And with design-based work, your proposal or piece should be functional. So, what problem is your piece trying to solve, and does it do that? So, again, we want to see that you're using your technical skill to make pieces that go further than just an exercise about technique. Um, and the limited space of the application portfolio really does require careful selection of pieces to include and deciding which pieces also to exclude. So I do recommend including some pieces based on direct observation. And what this means is working from real life. So making work of what's in front of you, maybe real life people, objects, and places, rather than working from photos. And I highly discourage drawing from photographs in general for your RISD application because this often leads to flattened or distorted drawings. And again, it's kind of the easiest way to take out your personal voice from the image. So again, like observational drawing, we want you to be experimental. It doesn't have to even be a drawing. It can be an observational sculpture, a painting, whatever you want. So slide room, let's dig a little bit into that and give you some visuals about what slide room will look like. Um, you will, like I said, start your application in the Common App and then have access to slide room, and then starting in the Common App when you're logged in there, um, and have added RISD to your schools, you will begin by filling out your student status, your start term, and admission plan in that Common App space. And for everyone here who's applying this year, your start term will be 2026. After that, you will need to agree to submit your portfolio using SlideRoom. And then once you do that, a portfolio tab will appear on the left-hand side of your page. You're going to click the portfolio tab and then click the Rhode Island School of Design portfolio site. And that button will navigate you to SlideRoom. And I will circle back to more tips on using SlideRoom in just a moment. Um, but I do want to acknowledge that this is what you will see when you log into SlideRoom. So it'll give you an overview of everything that we mentioned about the portfolio, before you start to add your pieces. And as you're adding those pieces, it is important to think about the documentation of your work, which is sometimes just as important as the work itself when we're thinking about an application to any college. So you really want to make sure that you focus on the artwork itself in each slide. So you want to refrain from including, for instance, a border around your piece. You want the piece to shine as much as it possibly can. I also want to mention that the reviewers do not have the ability to zoom into your work when we look at them on SlideRoom. Whenever we zoom, it does get pixelated. So again, hopefully that can encourage you to just use as much of the space as possible to let your piece shine. You want to double check the image size after you upload them, and images are in their correct orientation. So for instance, we hope that your pieces are not upside down or sideways. This seems really silly to even say, but it's something we see really often, and we just want to encourage students to be careful about all steps of the process. Here's an example of a student who has put way too much on one slide. You want to refrain from putting excessive information all on one slide. As you can see, it's really hard to read. It's not directing the viewer to one thing to look at. And again, we can't zoom. So if a reviewer sees this kind of an overly formatted slide, they're not going to read everything on the slide. So for any text that you have, I recommend putting it in the description space on the side, which everyone will have a description space for any text that might be talking about their artwork. Ideally, as you can tell by now, based on everything I've said, it's best to feature one artwork per slide. But if you have a three-dimensional piece, for instance, you can include more than one slide or more than one image on a slide showing the piece from different views. If you choose to go this route, I recommend no more than three images per slide. Um, and it is important to know when to edit. So your portfolio should feature mostly finished work that can stand on its own. Um, and the other thing I'll mention is, again, you don't want that text in the image. Um, this is just another example of what we don't want to see. And I feel like it's really good for you to see yourself how hard it is to look at an image like this. You hear us talk a lot about process, and we love to see process, but not this kind. So, an example of process that you would want to show is if you have fully transformed a material to be something that is unrecognizable from its original form, or if you have a sketchbook that is really dense with a lot of great investigations, and you could even submit a video of yourself flipping through the pages. But when you start to repeat yourself with images that look similar, it just starts to be overcrowded and really difficult for the reviewer to see your work shine in the way that we want it to. You can also, of course, submit GIFs, so moving images. And if you do submit a video, you can submit it through YouTube or Vimeo links. And we hope that they're no more than 2.5 minutes long. When it comes to arranging your work in Slide Room, it's not something you really want to stress too much about, but oftentimes we'll suggest that you put your strongest piece first and then your next strongest piece last. And if you have a third strongest piece, just sandwich that in the middle. Um, but honestly, that's not going to be the most important part of your application, and reviewers will really be bouncing from piece to piece anyway. So if it makes you feel better, then that's one way to do it. But again, it shouldn't be the biggest stressor for you. All right, so we're going to end with some tips before we go to the Q&A. So if you have not submitted questions yet, please do into the Q&A tab. But I want to leave you with a reminder that you don't apply directly to a major. So you want to remember that EFS is what you want to think about as you're putting your portfolio together. I want to remind you to edit down to just your strongest pieces, to be really concise, and know that it's okay to have 12. You don't have to add fluff in there. And then lastly, it's great help to give yourself a personal deadline. Um, I recommend setting that deadline at least 3 days before the actual application deadline, because that gives you enough time to make mistakes and enough time to ask questions, which are all great things to do. Um, and then what happens next? So after you've submitted your early decision application, after you've done all of the hard work, decisions will be released roughly around the end of the first week of December. And that may change, but this is the date that we're working towards, and hopefully that will reach that. Um, if you're admitted, wonderful. Once you're admitted, that's when you pay your deposit to commit to RISD. And the deposit deadline is still being determined, but it will likely be around early to mid-January. Usually, when you're admitted for early decision, this is when you withdraw your applications to other schools. And again, at this time, we do anticipate that the financial aid packages will be released at the same time as the admissions decision, but please note that if this does change, then all applicants will be notified. And the financial aid packages will only be applicable for those who have submitted all of the required financial aid materials, which are the RISD Institutional Financial Aid Form and the FAFSA. And again, we highly encourage all applicants to submit the financial aid form as soon as possible. And then for those who unfortunately are not admitted early decision, there are some of you who may be deferred to be reconsidered for regular decision. Um, where we will review your candidacy again with the rest of the applicant pool. And unfortunately, if you're not admitted, unfortunately, you cannot be considered for regular decision deadline, but you are able to apply next year because we only allow one application per cycle. So I will leave you with that. And thank you for sitting through that presentation. I know it was a lot of information, but I do want to come back and answer any questions that you might have with Emily as well.
Amazing. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Kara. I feel like I'm already more settled into this application process for this year. Okay, so we've had so many great questions. Let's try to get through them on the quicker end. I've answered some already, but we'll just jump right in. So, Kara, what are the common mistakes people make on their portfolios that not a lot of people know about?
Hmm. Well, I think the most common mistakes are the formatting, like we talked about, just overly formatting. We don't want to see multiple page PDF files as well. Um, but I think the one thing that students do that can set them back is submitting portfolios that are only about technical skill. I would say that I guess, the one trick to having a really stand out portfolio is having work that has that point of view, that personal reflection in there. So I would say the biggest mistake would be leaving that out. Um, the other things that we don't want to see any anime, any celebrity portraits, and we don't want to see any fan art. So all of those things, please leave them out of your portfolio and try to put in work that is, again, more personal to you, more unique to you, um, and some of that observational work as well.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. Okay, next question is how much consideration is given to the GPA?
Mm. So we definitely look at the GPA. For those of you that don't know, RISD, all students are required to take at least 1/3 of their education in the liberal arts, and any student is allowed to take classes at Brown University. So those sort of classes, we want to know you're ready for them, and your transcripts are a really great indicator of if you will be ready for them. So do your best to keep your grades up. We do take into consideration progress over time. So, if you want more time to make your transcripts a little bit stronger, regular decision is also a great option. Um, but yes, we do consider transcripts very much.
Amazing. Okay, the next question is you talked a little bit about the essay and that it comes from one of the Common App prompts. But one of the prompts is an open-ended prompt. So do you have any guidance for what the Common App essay should look like, regardless of prompt or even specific to prompt?
Sure. So I would say the more open-ended the prompt is, the more creative you can be. And I would encourage you in your essay to share parts of yourself that we can't already know from other parts of your application. So we know you all love art. That's why you're applying to RISD. So if you could write about something else other than art, that's going to help you stand out. Um, and especially with a more open-ended essay prompt, that gives you the flexibility to also talk about maybe other things that have inspired you in life or hurdles that you've overcome, or certain points of view that, again, we can't see from other parts of your application. So, the only thing that we don't want to see in an essay is we've seen students submit like screenwriting in their essay or like only a single poem. Those are creative and wonderful forms of expression and keep doing them in your life. But for a RISD application, it's kind of hard for the reviewer to understand if you're going to be ready for writing essays in that first year and your throughout your time at RISD. So try your best to still stick to the essay format. Um, but other than that, just you you have you have the agency to do what you want.
For sure. Okay, next question. Can you talk a little bit more about the timeline of submitting the application? Do you do Common App first and then Slide Room after, or do you do them at the same time? Like, what does that look like?
Sure. So you're going to start with your Common App, and then you don't have to fully finish your Common App to still have access to Slide Room. So you can kind of do them at the same time, but they are due on the same due date. So that deadline is for both the Common App and Slide Room.
Amazing. Okay, the next question is, sorry, I'm just scrolling through here. Are all early decision Just are all early decisions communicated? Can you tell us a little bit more about what it looks like on the other end of early decision in December when students are receiving their letters?
Yes, so all early decisions are communicated through the RISD portal. That RISD portal is going to be your space for all of the answers. So it will first give you access to your checklist of what you have submitted, what you have not submitted. So that will be really helpful for you to see. Second, like I said, that's where your decisions are going to be released. So regardless of what your decision is, that's where you'll find it. Um, Same for regular decisions. So if you are deferred to be considered in regular decision, you're still going to go back to that RISD portal for your decision.
Okay, amazing. Can you talk a little bit more about, I know we talked about transcripts, but there's some more specific questions like, are first semester senior year grades considered an ED? What are the actual grades that we're looking at when we're reviewing early decision applicants?
So we will see whatever your schools can provide us for up to that point. There's some schools that fluctuate with what they're able to send us, but regardless, we will be sent your final transcripts when they are ready. So it's important to also keep your grades up consistently, even after you've been admitted to RISD, because we still see them. But that's, I guess, determined by your school. Usually we see the first semester of senior year.
Yep. All right. Oh, this is an interesting question. How likely is it that two people from the same school will both get in early decision?
Oh, I really hope you have a friend that you want to go to school with. That's really sweet. Um, I don't know. It can happen. It's important to know too that like the people in your school, they're not your competition because we don't have a certain quota per school. We don't have any rules that say, well, if we've already admitted five from this school, we can't admit any more. So, I don't know. The chances could be maybe higher if you're working as a team and helping each other, critique each other's work, support each other. I don't know. But I hope you both get in. That's awesome.
All right, the next few questions are about deferrals. So the first one I'd love for you to answer is if a student is deferred admission from ED into the regular decision round, can they add more work to their portfolio in the meantime?
That is to be determined. Historically, we've done different things, and so we're still determining that at this point in time. But my best advice to you would be choose your application deadline, whether it's early decision or regular decision, based on when you feel you are going to have your strongest portfolio possible. So do not rely on being able to edit your portfolio after submitting it. Rely on that confidence that you've submitted the best portfolio possible. And it's okay to apply regular decision. There's no stress to apply ED.
All right, and then the other deferral question is, can you talk a little bit more about what that process might be like to be an early decision applicant that is deferred into the regular decision round?
Yeah, so that would mean that you are just your application would not be denied, it would not be accepted, it would just be shifted over to that RD pool. That would also mean that your early decision binding commitment would be taken away and you would just be reconsidered in regular decision. Um, that's kind of the only difference because we evaluate all applications under the exact same criteria. There's really nothing different that we review RD applications um, with or by. So That's really the only difference. And you would still have the ability to apply to other schools and compare financial aid packages if you were deferred to RD.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think it just can feel a bit confusing when you're on, on the other side of it.
Totally.
Okay, next question. If a student, this is more general, not directly about the application process. If a student isn't thinking the Brown RISD dual degree for themselves, can they still take classes at Brown?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's what most of our students end up doing. And for a lot of students, that ends up being enough. You can start doing that in your sophomore year. But if you are interested in dual degree, like I said, Emily will actually be hosting a webinar on October 22nd, right? For dual degree.
Yeah, October 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern. I dropped the link for that further or earlier on in the chat. But that'll be super helpful.
Mhm.
And it's still before both Brown and RISD's early decision deadline. So if you're still trying to figure out what that looks like for you, you'll have that opportunity. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm seeing a few questions about portfolio, specifically the captions for different portfolio pieces. How long should captions be for each piece, and what should you say in those captions?
Yeah. So those should be no more than 2 or 3 sentences, really. You want them to be very concise, to the point, and really direct the reviewer to exactly what you want them to know. They are not artist statements, so you don't have to be really elusive and poetic in these descriptions. You again want to be really to the point. And the descriptions, I would utilize them mostly to describe if your piece has a concept that might be a little bit harder to understand without having context, or if you have really transformed a material and want to describe how you transformed it. Maybe there's certain symbolism in your piece that someone from maybe outside of your culture might not readily know based on their own historical knowledge. So maybe you'd want to unpack that a little bit in your description. But again, you just want to be really concise and to the point.
Completely agree. Okay, the next question I see. This is more of a specific question. This student was told by their college counselor not to submit their SAT score because, in the college counselor's words, it would be adding information that wouldn't be useful for the reviewers. Do you think that's true, Kara? I feel like the
Yes.
answer is a little bit more complex than a yes or no.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say maybe reflect a little bit with your counselor and ask your counselor a little bit more context about what they mean. And maybe they want you to retake the test again. There's a little bit that I think we can read into and assume based on that question. But in general, for a RISD application, SATs and ACTs are not required. So if you have any hesitation about sending your score, maybe you don't feel like it's reflective of your strengths, don't send it and don't worry. It will not have any impact on your review. If you did do really well with those tests, then absolutely send those scores, and that will just be added information that we can know and say, wow, this person is really skilled in this area. But otherwise, I would say don't worry about it, and maybe talk a little bit with your counselor as well to see what they meant.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that we do review within context. So test scores do kind of mean different things depending on where in the world you're coming from, what types of resources your high school has been able to provide you. Different test scores sort of imply different things, and maybe that's part of the nuance that your counselor was getting into with that with that statement. So I agree. Maybe continue the conversation. Okay, next question. For international students, how do you typically advise those students in terms of deciding between regular and early decision?
Mm. Yeah, that's also a really tough question because it is such a personal thing. Um, I would say talk with your family and talk with your counselors, and they can better help you understand your situation. But in general, it is personal. So I would say talk with your family and counselors to see what makes the most sense coming as an international student. But everything else is the same in terms of requirements and how we review your application. So it's more of the personal questions that would be the determining factor for that.
For sure. Okay, let's see. This is interesting. If a student is admitted early decision, but their grades change in their spring semester of their senior year, so after they're admitted, is that going to change their acceptance in any way?
Most likely no, but if you fail all your classes, for instance, and don't graduate, then yes, you would probably have your acceptance taken away because the one requirement we do have is that all students graduate and or ob obtain their high school diploma or equivalent. So just make sure you keep your grades up and not too startling of a difference.
Okay, this is an interesting question about an essay again. So this student said that their Common App essay has to do with art and the importance of community. Um, can you talk a little bit more about what we are looking for out of the essay? And if the specific question from the student is, will the art component of the essay be a detriment to their application? Maybe they're thinking that it'll be redundant to other elements of their application.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. And it sounds like you also have a really thoughtful essay. So when we say like don't maybe try to not write about why you love art, I think more so what we mean is like an essay writing about how you fell in love with coloring when you were 2 years old and you've never been able to stop since. And ever since then, you've created all these drawings and like something more like that would be not as creative, but it sounds like you're connecting art to a much larger outlook on life and outlook on connecting with others in the community. So that actually sounds really interesting. Um, so yeah, thoughtful question, and I would say keep going.
I think even just having that question sort of indicates a good approach to the essay itself.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about English proficiency requirements for international or for students whose first language is not English? Um,
Mhm.
what does that look like? What are the tests that are options for them? And can they be considered for a waiver?
Yes. So if you would like to be considered for a waiver, you would email us and we would review you for that waiver. As far as requirements go, we accept TOEFL scores, IELTS, and Duolingo. Um, for the scores with Duolingo, we require a 120. For TOEFL, we require a 93, and for IELTS, we require a 7. These are all also on our website, so feel free to check back if you ever forget. Um, and I would say that the Duolingo test results are probably the easiest to get back promptly. So if you take a test, the score doesn't reflect your strengths appropriately, you can always take another test and we'll take your best score. And usually Duolingo is the most efficient way to do that.
All right. After a student submits the common application, can they submit additional or missing documents via the portal, or is that their last chance to add anything once they submit the common application?
You can absolutely email us, and we can add things to your application. That the best route is to email us so that you have clear confirmation that we've received your materials. And then even more confirmation will be about 48 hours after they've been put into the system. You'll see that on your portal, on that checklist. Um, However, if you think that that will happen for you, I recommend applying before the deadline. So that way you're still in that deadline zone as much as you can be.
Okay, this is a great question and one that I often have with students. Should a student prioritize having a slightly better portfolio and submitting a regular decision, or should they prioritize the early decision application process?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's always a tough one. Um, Again, it's a personal question, but I'll say that there is no strategy in applying early decision in terms of upping your chances of being admitted. So the likelihood of getting in stays the same, early decision versus regular decision. So the question really is asking yourself, what are the benefits of applying early decision versus applying regular decision? And is my portfolio at a point where it's as strong as it can be? My essay is as good as it can be, and my transcripts are really great too. You want to make sure that everything is just as good as it can be. If the answer is no to those questions, then I would say wait for regular decision and give yourself the grace to be okay with that. Like it's totally fine to apply regular decision too. So it's up to you,
Yeah,
which
I
is the
think
answer no one wants
that
to hear.
I know it's tough too, Kara, because I talk to a lot of students all over the country, and some high schools really emphasize their students that like early decision is the route to go, and for some universities that really might be the case.
Mm.
And at other universities, it might not be the case, and different high schools have different approaches for what their students want to do. So, like, we're here to reassure you all that for RISD, it's really not going to it's really more about you and the decision you want to make rather um, than RISD itself. Okay. We have a lot of great questions still coming through. Thank you all for such thoughtful questions. I'm going to note we have 8 minutes left in the session. We'll get through as many as we can in the next 8 minutes. But if we don't happen to get to your question today, you can always give us an email and we'll respond, to that as well. But Kara, next up for you, can you talk a little bit? I'm seeing some questions about major specific portfolio. Can you refresh everyone about portfolio in terms of like majors at RISD?
Yes. So all students apply undeclared. Um, so you are not applying directly to a major, and that means that you're technically being reviewed for that first experimental and foundation studies foundational year. So in that year, you have drawing, design, and a 3D class called spatial dynamics. So you want your portfolio to reflect that you're ready for those areas of practice, which means range, experimentation, and not a focus on one major. So even if you're interested in one way of making, you want to try to diversify your methods and your concepts as much as you possibly can um, to be ready for the application.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let me see here. I'm seeing a few questions from students who are interested in transferring to RISD, which is amazing. I will note that this webinar is geared towards first-year applicants. We don't offer an early decision application for transfer students. So I've pointed a few students in this direction, but like Kara mentioned at the very beginning, we have transfer-specific resources that you should definitely check out on risd.edu/live. Okay, this is an interesting question and maybe not one we can tackle in the amount of time we have, but for an international student, if they're accepted early decision, but the political situation in the United States might change, how should the student navigate these types of um, hiccups as an international student in particular?
Yeah, again, a tough one, and one that we probably can't tackle all in this space right now. But RISD is very understanding of just how things can change day to day. And we understand that everyone is experiencing different struggles throughout this process. So we want to work with you. And if you are experiencing anything that is um, putting any stress on the process, please reach out to us because we are here to help with that and take away as much of that stress as possible. So I would say just please stay in contact with us throughout the process as much as you can. Um, so that would be my response for that. And also, we do our best to email throughout the year with any updates, any changes, any news that we've heard that we have to respond to make sure that students are safe and taken care of. So also keep an eye on your emails because we do our best to be as consistent um, as possible and as prompt as possible.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions about sort of like statistics, and I don't think Kara or I have those numbers available to us. For questions like related to how many students apply ED every year, how many are admitted, what's the acceptance rate ED. Yeah, RISD doesn't publicize those numbers. So I don't know if you have anything extra to add to that, Kara.
No, that was very well said.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of data out there. And we do sort of publish like a limited amount of data every year, but not when we get super into the weeds. Okay, just looking at other questions here. Okay, yeah, so the student says that they've heard that colleges review applications in the context of their high schools. Is that true with RISD?
I guess yes and no. So we do take a holistic approach when we review. So we'll look at your um, the classes that your school offers and see, which classes you've taken advantage of, um, and take that sort of approach. But we don't say, like I said, like we don't admit only 5 students from one school and then say that's it. We can't admit any more. So don't worry about your application being compared necessarily too strongly to your peers from your school. But we do take it into context to again understand what resources students have had access to up until this point so that we can understand, like maybe you don't have the ability to take an art class at your school or you don't even have access to AP art or after school clubs of that nature. So in that way, we do look at it so that we have the most equitable reviewing process.
Okay, I think one last question. Maybe I don't know. We'll see. Here's one question. If a student is accepted through early decision but doesn't get enough financial aid in the package, what's the next move?
Great question. My advice to, again, everyone on this webinar is to fill out the RISD institutional financial aid form as soon as you possibly can, because that form will help our Student Financial Services Office make the best predictions and build the best package for you so that they can support you through the process and help you understand what could be coming your way, and how to navigate through it. So that would be my advice. And if down the line you do get your decision and it is a package that you're unable to meet, then the financial aid office will work with you and make sure that there's a plan that makes sense for you.
Okay, amazing. That's helpful in understanding. Okay, the rest of the questions that I'm seeing look like questions either we have already answered that you can find the answers to once you rewatch the recording, or questions that you can email us about in the future. So I think we'll wrap it up for the day. I'm gonna pass it back to you, Kara, to finish us off for the night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily, for helping with the questions. There's been, again, like you said, so many great questions. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I know that you're from so many different time zones and parts of the world. So thank you. We appreciate you. And we really hope you apply to RISD because we'd love to have you be a part of our community. If there's any resources that you are looking for, I bet you we have them. So please check out our website for webinars, portfolio reviews, and feel free to email us if you have any questions. But we appreciate you, and I hope you have a great morning, night, afternoon, wherever you are, and I hope to see you in the future. So thanks, everybody. Bye.